Welcome to a show where you will hear about how our liberty is being eroded by the very people that swear an oath to protect it.
Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost.
On this show, we will discuss many of the lies that the government that hates us, by the way, we will discuss the lies that the people in positions of power and influence spread every day.
And what is the best way to confuse children? Confuse them about their sexuality, confuse them about their gender, expose them to things that their little brains are not ready for yet. That is how they are confusing children. It is leading to chaos, and Big Daddy government, of course, can be there to pick us all up and take care of us at the end of it.
We will also talk about how current elected leadership at all levels of government has been corrupted by power and control, as well as discuss the types of leadership needed to correct our republic's course.
We the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government.
Providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States right now.
I am your host, Larry Linton, retired U.S. Navy Command Master Chief and prior Tennessee House of Representatives District 12 candidate, and welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. Well, welcome to this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. I'll start with a brief recap of my activities since the last show. So late Friday afternoon, I received a phone call. Well, really, it was a voicemail because I don't answer phone calls from numbers that aren't in my contact list. That's a good way to avoid spam calls besides using apps that block them. Anyway, this number did leave me a voicemail, so I called back. The person was a member of the Young Americans for Liberty organization, and I received an invitation to an event close by the homestead in October of this year. This did not occur out of the blue, by the way. My name was provided to this organization by one of the most conservative legislators in the Tennessee General Assembly. I do not want to mention this person's name on the podcast as a referral, though. It might set the overlords from the Tennessee Republican Party on his tail or some other such cancel culture nonsense. Because yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is not just the declared communists that engage in cancel culture. The ruling elite in the Republican Party here in Tennessee, they do the same thing. The Tennessee Republican Party is set to convene their annual meeting later this year, next month from what I hear. At this meeting, the rumor is they will be considering changes to the bylaws concerning people that want to run as a Republican. I believe I warned you about this a few episodes ago, back on the 23rd of June. It was in episode 113 that I encouraged all Tennessee listeners to contact their state executive committee members and ask them about proposed changes to the Tennessee GOP bylaws. I have heard some information through multiple sources now that the Republican Party here in Tennessee, they will make the change that prevents anybody that previously ran as an independent candidate against a member of the GOP ineligible to run as a bona fide Republican for a couple of election cycles. I'm not sure how long the actual quote-unquote banishment will be, but you know what this change is, don't you? Of course, it is nothing more than the continuation of incumbent protection, something which the GOP here in Tennessee is quite adept at. But it is also cancel culture at its finest. Speak ill about or run against a Republican incumbent, and you will not be allowed to play in the Tennessee GOP's reindeer games every election cycle. I reached out to both of my SEC representatives in this past week, especially since I've heard this pending change from multiple sources, as I previously mentioned, and both of them have replied to my query. They informed me that they had not heard of any proposed changes to the bona fide part of being a Republican running for office. The proof will be in the pudding, as they say, though. We should know the outcome sometime later this year, but if I were a betting man, I would be betting on the state GOP taking measures to further protect their incumbents. As I mentioned last week, all you have to do is a bit of trend analysis with regards to the Tennessee GOP. And you will probably come to the same conclusion that I and many others have, that the leadership in the party is straight up corrupt, which just happens to be the topic of this week's episode. Corrupt leadership. Any organization that seeks to prevent people from running for office is corrupt. Period. Full stop. Now, moving on, I'm still in the process of installing new shelving in the kids' garage. It is fun. Not really. Although I am getting to use a lot of the skills in carpentry that my pop taught me while I worked alongside him as a teenager. It has brought back many fond memories of working with the man that raised me. Anyway, that project should be finished soon, probably this weekend. It should be my last major home improvement project for many months or years to come. So now let's talk about a few upcoming events here in Tennessee. The first one I want to talk about, and I think this is really important, folks, is an event that will be held on Saturday, September 23rd, down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It is the Conservative Candidates Academy, and it's being organized by Brandon Lewis, the founder and editor of Tennessee Conservative News. Brandon has assisted in many campaigns prior to starting up his own business and starting up the Tennessee Conservative News. In fact, he has published a book titled How to Raise Money for Political Office, the original guide to winning elections through aggressive, organized fundraising. I got a copy of that book myself, and I should have paid better attention to the guidance contained in it. Rest assured I will in future endeavors. Anyway, Brandon has a great lineup of presenters at this academy. During this one-day academy, you will get the strategies, resources, and expert advice needed to win your next election if you're running for office. The subject matter expert presenters at the Academy will be Sue Zoldak of Zoldak Victories. She will be presenting material on digital strategies for success on Election Day. Eric Wader will also be presenting. He will be discussing how to canvass for strong connections to conservative voters. Tennessee State Representative Brian Ritchie will also be there talking about how challengers can win state elected office. After all, he beat an incumbent in the 2022 elections. Another presenter will be Taylor Bloom of I-360. She will be discussing topics of voter data and get out the vote efforts in addition to communication tactics that drive voters to the polls. And finally, Brandon himself will be discussing critical campaign concepts, proactive fundraising, and something he has become intimately familiar with here in the last couple of years, dealing with a hostile media. If you are a conservative concerned with the little to no effort by incumbent Republicans currently serving in elected office, or are looking to defeat an incumbent tyrannical communist representing your legislative district, sign up and attend this event. You can find more details on the website of conservativecandidatesacademy.com. All one word, no spacing or punctuation, conservativecandidatesacademy.com. Seating is limited, so be sure to sign up soon. The next event I want to speak about is a little closer in time and closer to Sevier County. The grassroots conservative organization Knox for Liberty will be holding their Freedom Fest this August 19th. Join your fellow patriots for good food and good vibes at Creekside. It will be a fun-filled evening at Knox for Liberty's inaugural Freedom Fest. There will be an incredible lineup of inspiring speakers, conservative sponsor vendor booths, entertaining music, and great food. Comedian Brad Stein is headlining for the evening. For more information and get your tickets to this event, check them out on the web at www.knoxforliberty.org/freedomfest. Again, that is www.knoxforliberty.org/freedomfest. The final event I would like to make the audience aware of is another one closer to home. It is the 12 Outdoors Festival, scheduled for October 19th through the 22nd. It is billed as the largest veteran event in the Smoky Mountains. So my fellow veteran listeners that live here in East Tennessee, make plans to attend this. This fantastic 4-day annual event is packed with over 400 vendors, an incredible kids zone, and thrilling activities like archery tournaments and axe throwing. For more information and to purchase your tickets, head over to www.12outdoors.com. Again, that is www.12outdoors.com. That's the number 12, not the word. 12outdoors.com. Now let's get on to the topic of corrupt leadership. First, though, what have I always said about controlling the narrative? Also, think back to what I said about controlling the language. If you control the language, you control the narrative, thereby giving you control of the outcome. In this instance, we have to look no further than the usurper-in-chief that currently resides in the White House for the latest example. With all of the damning testimony coming out of the House Oversight Committee about the bribery scheme conducted by the Biden crime family, a change in the language or a change in the narrative has become necessary. This is from an article in August of 2019. Pay close attention to the child sniffler and toddler nibbler, apparently based upon some recent video, when he had this to say about discussing business with family members. Quote, "I never discuss business with my son or my brother or anyone else, anything having to do with their businesses, period. And what I will do is the same thing we did in my administration. There will be an absolute wall between personal and private and the government. There wasn't any hint of scandal when we were there. That's why I never talk with my son or my brother or anyone else, even distant family, about their business interests." Unquote. Now, there's plenty to pick apart with his statement that there was never any hint of scandal when he was part of the Obama administration, because that's a flat-out lie. Just because the mainstream legacy news media didn't report on any scandals, it doesn't mean that there weren't any. But back to the words he used. I never talk with my son or my brother or anyone else, even distant family, about their business interests. Of course, we also have some audio from a CNN clip from back on the 22nd of September 2019. Before we get into Biden answering Steve Doocy from Fox News and his question about his son's business dealing, I want to play a bit of audio from the so-called journalists at CNN. They are doing their best to try to flip the narrative as well. Listen to this.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Marquardt in for Ana Cabrera. Abuse of power. That is the blunt message that is being delivered in crystal clear terms from a fired-up Joe Biden to a Fox News reporter who was asking him about the debunked conspiracy theory that is being pushed by the president that involves Biden, Biden's son, and Ukraine.
The debunked conspiracy theory that is being pushed by the president, the debunked.
Yeah, that's right, Alex. Earlier today, he did talk to the media about these unfounded claims about him and his son. There is no evidence to these claims.
Unfounded claims about him and his son. There is no evidence to these claims.
Unfounded claims about him and his son. There is no evidence to these claims.
Unfounded claims about him and his son.
You see what I mean? And now Biden answering Doocy's question.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business. I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business.
Now, in a just world and a constitutional republic that doesn't have a two-tiered system of justice, that right there, folks, will be called exactly what it is. Lies upon lies upon lies. But what about Biden's statement has changed? A nuance changed, but it's a change nonetheless. And it's about how Joe never discussed his son's business has now become Joe is not in business with his son. The unscrupulous legacy media, along with all of the communists in our government, they will now take that nuance and run with it. This is what he meant to say all along, is how they will describe it. After all, how long have we heard that Joe is just being Joe when he speaks? His diarrhea of the mouth is just part of his charm. He is the benevolent grandfatherly figure that is bringing dignity and respect back to the White House, is what they say. It is absolutely disgusting, yet they will get away with it. For two main reasons, by the way. The chief of the two main reasons is quite adequately captured in a Babylon Bee post earlier this week. The main headline reads, quote, McCarthy says 783rd impeachable offense by Biden will be the last straw, unquote. Kind of accurately sums up our situation right now, don't you think? Feckless Republican leadership. I'm old enough to remember when a president was impeached for asking a foreign leader to look into actual crimes committed by a government official alongside his family, all on a phone call. What were his words on that phone call that resulted in Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the communists in the House of Representatives impeaching President Trump for? Well, I don't want to spend too much time going over the whole transcript, but I will post it in the blog on my website. Head over there to read it for yourselves. You see, President Trump got himself into trouble with the deep state for looking into actual crimes by the American communists, as well as the money laundering and bribery scheme that the Biden crime family were engaged in. Those communists in the House weren't really looking or acting to protect Biden, though. No, because all of those roads in Ukraine, they all lead straight back to Obama. They will do everything in their power to protect Barack Hussein Obama and his legacy. And that first impeachment, it was a completely partisan vote, too. Only members of the Communist Party voted to impeach him that first time. The second impeachment, well, it could be considered bipartisan, though, because only a handful of trans-publicans voted for that one. And just what was the charge for the second impeachment? Well, I'll give it to you. Incitement of an insurrection. Now pay attention to that here with Jack Smith's latest filings. They are using that to try to prevent President Trump from running and winning the Oval Office again, because they know they can't stop him on the campaign field. But remember, that insurrection, by the way, it is only called that when it benefits the narrative. It magically transforms into a riot when the media and the communists in the government are working to defend Ray Epps. That's a story for another day, though. Now here, I'm going to play the audio from what President Trump said that day, January 6th, in our nation's capital. His exact words. Give it a listen.
After this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is apparently the words necessary to charge an individual with incitement of insurrection. Inciting an insurrection where the only shots fired in an attempt to violently overthrow the government were ones fired by a communist-created protected class of person, and they were fired killing an unarmed female protester. And they get away with this stuff every day. So the chief of the two reasons they will get away with it is there is spineless leadership in the Republican Party the party that is supposed to strictly adhere to and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. The second of the two main reasons they will get away with it is this: apathy. Yes, generations of apathy in the American electorate. So, pay attention over the coming weeks as the communists control the narrative through their nuanced change from discussed business to in business, and the apathy of the country in willingly going along with the change in the narrative. Combine those with weak, spineless, and possibly involved members of the Republican Party, and this corruption will be glossed over and forgotten by this time next year. I am sure you have heard about this in other conservative circles ad nauseum lately, so let's cover down on some more examples of corrupt leadership in our nation right now. One of the biggest purveyors of corruption in our nation today is none other than the National Education Association, the nation's largest lobbying group. I read an interesting article in The Hill the other day that should make not only every parent with children in government education centers vomit, they should also be marching in the street calling for the complete destruction and then finally outlawing of that vile organization. Well, they had this to say, quote, "Each American school child has a multitude of identities that shape how they feel upon entering school each day." Unquote. Now, are they trying to say that children are suffering from multiple personality disorders? Nope. What they are trying to do is justify the work they are doing to confuse children. These corruptocrats also asked, quote, "How can we, as educators, ensure our schools support each of those identities so that each of our students can learn and flourish?" Unquote. It's almost laughable. If this organization was truly advocating for educating children, why this push into the mental health, really mental unhealth, of children in schools? As the article further notes, the NEA's focus on children's identities is misplaced and misleading. Misplaced because the only relevant identity of a child in government school should be concerned about would be about a student learning to read, write, reason, and do arithmetic. And misleading because it is the multiple identities or mental illness of the adults that are involved in driving this garbage in government schools. These members of the alphabet mafia and the parents suffering from Transhausen syndrome by proxy that are creating a tsunami of mental illness in children today. The government indoctrination centers have been failing their stated mission for decades now. By that I mean their responsibility and function to educate children. Instead, they have been quite successful in meeting their unstated mission. Right now, all across the country, we are in the midst of rampant illiteracy and innumeracy. Why? With the amount of money and confiscatory taxes government at all levels takes from us and spends on government education, one would think we would have an exceptionally high percentage of children that graduate high school and are proficient in reading, writing, and arithmetic. But that is not where we are at, is it? No. Keep that in mind the next time you hear a politician talking about, quote-unquote, investing in our children's education with our tax dollars. Where has the return on investment been? What is the ROI for government education? If government education were a private business, it would have been shuttered long ago because of the negative ROI. 2/3 of American fourth graders are functionally illiterate. Eighth graders' average math test scores have dropped to their lowest levels in 35 years. Their reading scores have dropped to the lowest level in 2 decades. And this is not just a result of the lockdowns and shutting down schools during the pandemic either. This has been the trend for years now. Why? Well, the answer to this situation is a common theme. It is because the government is involved. To see the truth in that, you just have to look at the ROI of homeschooling and private education. Government education is only producing two things. The main thing that the so-called schools are producing are, one, vast numbers of children suffering from mental illness with their critical race and critical gender theory instruction and their social emotional learning curriculums that are destroying the nuclear family unit, and two, an even more vast number of young adults entering into post-secondary education or the workforce that are not capable of critical thinking, creating a class of people dependent upon government. The best and most accurate statement from the author of this article is this, quote, "The notion that public schools are understood as support centers for students' identities is nothing more than a semantic papering over of their increasing failure as public schools. That is, institutions that impart skills and knowledge to American children without regard to race, class, or creed," unquote. Keep in mind, though, that they are failing in their publicly stated purpose. They are being wildly successful in their unstated purpose. The unholy alliance of government and the National Education Association and all of the many so-called teachers' unions in the country is corruption through and through, corrupting the minds and stunting the mental growth of children all across the fruited plains, and corrupt through the fact that both of them use the taxpayers' money against the interests of parents and taxpayers everywhere. Tennessee recently passed and signed into law a provision that provides teachers in the volunteer state a significant raise, and this is a perfect example of this. This bill provides a minimum salary for teachers of $50,000 per year by the 2026-2027 school year. That moves Tennessee into a top 10 state in the nation for teacher pay. We can't forget the fact that these teacher salaries are provided by the taxpayers only. That's the government corruption part of this we can discuss at another time. One would think, though, that this bill would be supported by the teachers' unions, right? Isn't that one of their stated priorities, ensuring that teachers get better wages? But no. The Tennessee Education Association, along with other quote-unquote teacher associations and member educators, are suing Transpublican Bill Lee, along with the state's interim education commissioner, over some provisions in the law that provided these pay raises. Just what provisions, you may ask? Well, the provision that disallows the unions to automatically deduct union dues via payroll deduction of the teachers. The union's compulsory cut of teacher sweat equity, whether the teacher agrees with the union or not. They don't want the teachers to actually have to stroke a check for their monthly dues, providing them an opportunity to consider what they are paying for. If the dues are an automatic payroll deduction, there isn't much thought to what the money does or even how much it is. You see, the teachers' unions learned that trick from the federal government with their federal withholding of taxes scheme. Most people in our country today, I believe I've spoken about this before, and because of these automatic withholdings and payroll deductions, they do not know what they actually make, only what they bring home each payday. It is the method government and unions use to achieve coerced, apathetic compliance from their citizens or employees. When shopping for commercial goods and services, the consumer actually considers the price in relation to what is in the bank account and how it fits into their budget. Government and unions have created these programs to remove that obstacle of consumer choice. Automatic payroll tax and dues payments don't have to be budgeted for because the employee or citizen, they never see that money. Nifty, right? That is why we have seen the explosive growth in size and scope of both of those entities that are often in an unholy alliance. That, ladies and gentlemen, is corruption. Until we all wake up and shake off this apathy, the corruption will only grow. The last thing I want to share with you this week, though, is news of a slight win in the culture war. And it's coming out of the far left coast as well, which was shocking. There's news out of Oregon State University last week that shows that some college students are starting to get sick of the alphabet mafia's tactics. Some geniuses at that university decided to conduct a woke gender study survey. 50 of the 349 responses to the survey were considered slurs, hate speech, or direct targeting of the research team. It's absolutely hilarious. So you want to know what's considered slurs or hate speech or targeting of the research team? Well, it's because some students identify themselves as attack helicopters, or they identify their ethnicity as a gift card. These commie researchers deem these answers as, well, what do you think these clowns called these answers? Yep, white supremacy. When asked about disabilities, some respondents claim to be illiterate. Others argue that transgenderism should be considered a disability due to its inability to come to terms with biological reality. Absolutely beautiful. I wish I could shake the person's hand who gave that answer. I would even buy them a dinner. Well, folks, that's it for this week. In closing, we have this week's wisdom from God's Word, and today it comes to us from Ephesians 5:11. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. To reprove means to reprimand or censure someone. Not censor, but censure. Censure means to express severe disapproval of someone or something, especially in a formal statement. That is what we are all called to do, especially as it relates to the acts of darkness engaged in by a corrupt government or by corrupt members of the political parties. Also by corrupt entities such as unions that can only be tenuously considered private organizations, because they are all working in an unholy alliance to deny citizens and the taxpayers our liberty. Liberty that is supposed to be secured by government, not eroded by it. We need to call them out for it at every opportunity. Thank you all for listening, and I pray that you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.